Hello everybody, it's jrobichess. We're going to be taking a look at a tactical mate line that I missed in a recent game of mine. Still won the game, but I missed the strongest possible continuation. So go ahead and pause the video. It's black to move. See if you can find the forced checkmate sequence. It's quite a few moves, so if you find it, that's awesome. If not, don't sweat it. I'm sure you still would have won the game from this material advantage. But we're going to take a look at that. Then we're going to swing back and we're going to take a look at how my opponent could have turned the game around a little bit earlier. All right, let's get started. I found the first few moves. The first best move, take that pawn on d4, hit the check. Now, if the king goes to f3, it's a mate in 3. So go ahead and pause the video, see if you can find it. I'm not going to go over that right now, though. In my game, my opponent found the best possible move, which was king to g2. And from here now is where I deviated, but we're going to take a look at the strongest line first. The best move here is queen back to d5 check. Now the king has to pretty much go to h3. If the king goes to f2, it's a mate in 3 again. I'm not going to show it. Go ahead and pause the video, see if you can figure out how you would mate that king in 3 moves after that. But from here, it's pretty much forcing the king to go to h3 to survive the longest. Queen now comes in, hits the check because it had access to the 5th rank. King goes back to g2, rook check, rook capture. Now it's important here to capture with the rook first. Rook hits the check, king goes to f1. Check, and then it's checkmate and game over. So hopefully you got that line. Definitely, I think it was a checkmate in 7. So if you did, that's awesome. Post in the comments. Let's go back and look at what I played in the game, though, which ended up being quite a bit slower. So like I said, I did find the queen to d4 check, and what ended up happening here is I hit the check on g1, and basically it took me a long time. Obviously, I had a good material advantage, but it took me quite a while to finish the game off, which I did, but unfortunately it would have been a lot better to have that nice mate in 7 sequence, but there it is, checkmate right there. All right, let's go back and take a look at how the game evolved and where my opponent missed a crucial tactical opportunity to finish the game. So we got into a Dutch defense. And I'm just going to flip through the first few moves. Basically, my goal in this game was to get a strong presence on the castle position of my opponent and swing some pieces over there to bring into the attack. I wanted to leave my bishop on c8, the light square bishop, to protect the pawn on b7 for the short term. And basically, I infiltrated with my queen here to h4, and I was looking for a way to bring as many pieces into the attack as I possibly could. My opponent obviously didn't want my queen to stay there, which was fine. And here comes the rook left now to f6. And, I'm just basically jockeying for positional control here. And I was looking for a way to bring my bishop into h4, some kind of a pin mechanism or some kind of attacking sacrifice line at some point. And then I realized, you know what? My opponent just has way too many pieces near his castle position for the defense. I had a nice bishop perched on e7, which had access to these long dark square diagonals. And I thought, you know what? I can swing my pieces over for a queen side initiative pretty good. So that was my goal, and that's what I did. I swung my pieces over for a queen side initiative, and things were doing fine here. My opponent played his knight up to a4. I had a number of move options here that I could have played. I played queen over to c7, and here's where I start to get a little bit into some questionable moves. I bring my dark square bishop back to d8, which is fine. I could play, say, something like queen to a5 or something like that, but my opponent took that away, and here's where I made a mistake. I pushed my pawn up to b5. Now there's no immediate tactical problem here, but what unfortunately this does is it lets my opponent perch his knight on c5, and this knight is going to be a beast to get off of that square. And in fact, getting it off the square is what I ended up doing, but by doing so I created a huge weakness here on my pawn on c6, and my opponent actually, he caught on to it, but it wasn't able to capitalize on it. So let's take a look at what happened. So I knew that problems were coming, so I wanted to get rid of this knight. So I lined up the bishop on e7, attacking the knight. My opponent swung his rook over. It's always great to have a rook supporting your queen when you're bearing down a file towards the enemy queen. And here I decided to take. Mistake. My opponent recaptures here with the queen, and now this pawn on c6 is a horrible weakness for me. Go ahead and pause the video and see all of the things that you can think of doing here in this position. Now, to try to curtail this a little bit, I lifted the rook up to f6 to give a defender to the pawn. Unfortunately, this just lets my opponent crash into the position with bishop takes on d5, which is what he played. And from here, I brought the bishop up now to e6, trying to curb the onslaught. Now this is where my opponent missed a beautiful line that would have pretty much won the game for him. So go ahead and pause the video, see if you can find the best continuation for white here, and let's see if you can find the best possible line to bring a world of hurt to black. All right, the best possible play in this position is bishop takes on c6. Now, what are you going to do as black? Well, your rook's under attack. As soon as that bishop moves, your queen's under attack. Your queen no longer has a defender. So it's a world of hurt here, right? What are you going to do? Well, the only thing you can really do in this position right now is basically get that rook off of the a8 square, play it something like to d8, at which point another pawn drops when the bishop takes on b5. The queen's under attack. You got to save the queen, and at the same time, you got to protect that pawn on a7. So you got to play your queen over here to b8, and basically we continue on with a series of moves. And what ends up happening here is, you might be asking yourself, why not take the queen there? It doesn't really matter because the bishop can take with check and win the piece. So it's best to take the bishop there. But what ends up happening is you're just down a full piece of material in pawns. So white definitely could have won the game from this position. Unfortunately, my opponent missed it and decided instead to take the bishop. And then unfortunately for my opponent again, he had a pawn advantage in this position. Not a guaranteed win by any stretch of the imagination, but I do have that horrible weak pawn on c6 that I'm sure my opponent will be able to capitalize on in the future. But he hung his queen here, unfortunately. And from this point, we get to the starting position in the video, which was after the rook captures here on c6. So that led to the mate in 7 sequence. So I hope you found all of the possible lines that would have been the best lines in the game. I have absolutely no problems putting videos up of my mistakes or my errors or my losses when it's instructional. And I thought this was instructional both for the checkmate sequence in 7, but also for creating that huge weakness on c6. Don't do that. Don't create those weak pawns if you don't have to. And I didn't have to in that position. That was totally a mistake. It wasn't a complete blunder, but it was definitely a mistake that led to pretty much the same result as a blunder drop in a piece. So take care. Hope you found the video useful, and we will see you next time.